Welcome to my series of basketball videos where I'll be comparing various NBA greats against each other. I'm doing this because I find that a lot of the basketball videos comparing players on YouTube are too focused on the big names and sometimes compare players from different positions. Lots of people compare Jordan to LeBron and Kobe to Duncan, for example, due to their similar levels of achievements, but since those players play different positions and have different styles of play, it's not an interesting comparison. In this series, I want to do comparisons between not just more well-known players, but players from days past, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the ABA as well, that most modern fans probably do not have too much knowledge about. Also, as much as possible, I want to compare players that play similar positions and/or similar play styles. To me, that's a more interesting and fruitful comparison. I'll be using 8 different metrics to judge each player. Scoring. This category will be defined by each player's career points per game, peak points per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of scoring titles. Rebounding. This category will be defined by each player's career rebounds per game, peak rebounds per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of rebounding titles. Passing. This category will be defined by each player's career assists per game, peak assists per game, both in regular season and playoffs, and number of assist titles. Efficiency advanced metrics. This category will be defined by each player's career true shooting percentage, PER, and win shares per 48. Reason I use true shooting percentage is because it's more fair to guards. Defense. This category will be defined by each player's all defensive selections, defensive win shares, and defensive player of the year awards. The reason I'm not using blocks, steals, or defensive box plus minus is because I want to compare the achievements of older players that modern fans might not have too much knowledge about, and players in the 1960s and early 1970s do not have these stats tracked. Awards. This category will be defined by All-Star appearances, All-NBA selections, MVPs, Finals MVPs, and championships as a top 3 player. The reason I have to count championships as a top 3 player on the team is because otherwise you'll get into the situation where, for example, Robert Horry has 7 rings and Karl Malone has 0, and it's not representative of how much better a player is if you weren't a top 3 player on that team contributing to a championship. Also, I'll be including ABA stats and awards and using them equivalent to their respective NBA stats and awards. Also, no All-NBA third team selections are included because All-NBA third teams weren't added until the late 1980s, which is unfair to older players. Playoffs. This category will be defined by how many Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals and Finals a player has been to, and how many championships they won as a top 3 player on the team. Yes, this is supplementary to the awards category because it also rewards players for making it far in the playoffs, even if they don't necessarily win at all. Totals. This category will be defined by longevity, how many total points, rebounds, assists, and win shares a player has accumulated throughout their career, and rewards a player's durability. After all, a lot of people say the best ability is availability. And of course, this is only going to be my opinion from comparing the available metrics, since I've not watched most of these players live or even been born when some of these players have been playing. And to keep it fair, I'm judging them based on how they did in their own era. There's no comparing what this NBA player played in today's era or the 1960s, none of that. It'll be strictly based on their stats and accomplishments within their own era against that era's competition, which makes the most sense to me. So I hope you guys enjoy this comparison video and hopefully learn something new from it. The 35th episode in the series looks at 2 all-time great centers who are cornerstones and the all-time leading scorers of their respective franchises. Patrick Ewing was known as the Warriors center for the New York Knicks. He was very skilled offensively and defensively, and he took the Knicks to the finals in the 90s, but unfortunately wasn't able to bring them to the promised land. Dwight Howard was the franchise player for the Orlando Magic, helping them secure their second finals berth in their history in the late 2000s. A dominant defensive player whose reputation unfortunately has only gone downhill since his time with the Magic, and was ultimately even snubbed from the ABA's 75th anniversary team. Which player had the greater career? Let's find out. In the scoring category, it's not particularly close, as while Dwight was a decent scorer, putting up 15.7 points per game for his career, peaking at 22.9 points per game in 2011, and averaging 15.3 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 27 points per game in 2011, scoring was not a strong point, and he was widely criticized for not working on his game enough, and his offensive skill set was lacking. Ewing, on the other hand, was one of the best scoring centers of his era, as he averaged 21 points per game for his career, peaking at 28.6 points per game in 1990, and 20.2 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 29.4 points per game in 1990. Unlike Dwight, Ewing was a very skilled scorer with an array of offensive moves from the perimeter and the post, and could shoot the mid-range very well, shoot a hook from the post, or go in for a powerful dunk as needed. This category isn't very close and will easily go to Ewing. In the rebounding category, both players were great rebounders, but Dwight might be the best rebounder of his era. Ewing averaged 9.8 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 12.1 rebounds per game in 1993, and 10.3 rebounds per game in the playoffs, peaking at 12.8 rebounds per game in 1988. Dwight averaged 11.8 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 14.5 rebounds per game in 2012, and 11 rebounds per game also in the playoffs, peaking at a Rodman-like 15.8 rebounds per game in 2008. In addition, Dwight has also led the league in rebounding 5 times, while Ewing has never led the league in rebounding. So while Ewing is a very solid rebounder, Dwight's combination of size and athleticism allowed him to become the most dominant rebounder of his era, so this category will go to him. In the passing category, both players were quite below average passers, though that was not what their team expected them to do. Ewing averaged 1.9 assists per game for his career, peaking at 3 dimes a game in 1991, and 2 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 3.1 assists per game in 1990. Dwight averaged only 1.3 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 1.9 per game in 2007 and 2012, and 1.2 assists per game in the playoffs, also peaking at 1.9 per game in 2009. So for this category, although neither players were good passers, I'll have to give Ewing the edge because at least he would pass out of the post sometimes, whereas Dwight is more or less a black hole and hardly ever passed the ball when it got to him. In the efficiency and advanced metrics category, it's interesting because although Ewing was a very efficient player, Dwight is an all-time efficient player and rarely took low percentage shots. Dwight's limited offensive arsenal meant that he relied almost purely on dunks and layups, increasing his efficiency, while Ewing's expanded offensive arsenal meant that he took more risks with his shots from the perimeter. Which results in lower efficiency compared to Dwight. So ironically, Ewing's expanded skill set almost hurts him here, and Dwight's limited skill set actually helps him. So in this category, it'll actually go to Dwight. In the defense category, it's very close as both players were great defenders and rim protectors. Ewing only had 3 all-defensive selections, but that's because he played in an era with David Robinson, Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, Hakeem Olajuwon. Ewing had an incredible amount of competition at his position, which limited his all-defensive selections and also explains why he didn't have any defensive player of the years. Dwight, on the other hand, played in an era with less competition at the big man position, and Dwight pretty much dominated his era in terms of being a defensive big. He was a 5-time All-Defensive and 3-time Defensive Player in a year all in a row. So how do I judge this one? Well, I would have to say this. If Ewing played in Dwight's era, I have no doubt that Ewing would have multiple Defensive Player of the Years and way more all-defensive selections. While if Dwight played in Ewing's era, he would not have as many Defensive Player of the Years or any, and wouldn't have as many all-defensive selections either. I know players can't choose their era, but if we are talking strictly about defensive ability, I'll have to believe that both Ewing and Dwight are great defenders, and I don't think Dwight is necessarily better just because of the Defensive Player of the Year awards, which was a result of lower competition in his era. And if you look at the defensive win shares, they actually have similar totals as well. I know it's a bit unfair to Dwight, but I'm going to call this one a tie, as both players were incredible shot blockers and defenders at their position. In the awards category, I actually think it's pretty close. Ewing has more All-Star appearances and more total All-NBA first and second team selections, but Dwight has more All-NBA first team selections with 5 compared to Ewing's 1. Again, this is a result of era, as Ewing had to compete with Mutombo, Hakeem, Mourning, Shaq, and Robinson for All-NBA selections, while Dwight was just clearly the best center of his era. Dwight also has a championship, albeit as a role player, so I'm not counting that one. But like I said, I don't want to penalize Dwight for his era too much, so I still do want to note that his All-NBA first team selections do count for something. So in the end, I feel that Dwight's dominance as clearly the best center of his era roughly puts him equal to Ewing's extra All-Star selections, and accounting for the fact that Ewing had tougher competition, and I'll have to actually call this category a tie as well. In the playoffs category, it's fairly close, as Ewing was clearly the best player on the 1994 Knicks team that made it to the finals, but was injured in the 1999 playoff run, so didn't get to play in that finals. But he has one other Eastern Conference appearance in 1993 where he lost to Jordan's Bulls. For Dwight, he was clearly the best player on the 2009 Magic team that made it to the finals, but he was a role player for the 2020 Lakers finals round and championship. In addition, he has one other Eastern Conference appearance as well as a Western Conference appearance for the Rockets. I think this is a pretty close one as well, so I'll have to call this one a tie. In the longevity category, it's also pretty close. Ewing has more total points, while Dwight has more total rebounds and a few more total win shares. I feel that this is also a very close category that had to be a tie as well. So when all the categories are summed up, Ewing takes the scoring and passing categories, while Dwight takes the rebounding and efficiency categories, with the rest being a tie. So overall, it's still a tie, so if forced to pick one, I might actually have to give the edge to Dwight, because of his championship ring and Defensive Player of the Year awards, which Ewing doesn't have. This might surprise some people, as Dwight Howard is a player that I find often underrated in the modern NBA. NBA fans turned on him after he left the Magic, calling him soft or not serious enough about the game or didn't care about working on his game. But that isn't being fair to Dwight. Dwight Howard in his prime was nothing short of dominant. He led a team to the NBA Finals, he was 5-time All-NBA First Team, he won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in a row, and he led the league in rebounding 5 times and the blocks twice. Advanced analytics also put Dwight's impact very high. Did it surprise some people that he had better true shooting percentage, better win shares per 48, better PER, and more career win shares than Patrick Ewing? Dwight was a huge snub off of the NBA's 75th anniversary team, and I felt that he should have easily got on that list. Although he was not a great offensive player and he jumped around a lot of teams later in his career, nobody can deny that he was an athletic specimen and a dominant defensive player in his prime. And overall, I feel that Dwight gets disrespected in way too many conversations. Patrick Ewing is a player who is much more appreciated in general than Dwight. He played almost his entire career for the New York Knicks, and although he failed to win them a championship, he got them close enough to a 7-game series in the finals. Ewing was a complete two-way player on the offensive and defensive end, but unfortunately injuries started piling up for him, and his true prime didn't last very long, but nevertheless remains a New York Knicks legend. Hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next comparison video.